Hi, so it's Thanksgiving weekend, and I've tried to make, I've now done like three separate videos, all of which I can't post. The first one, I made some technical errors where I thought that when you increase the sort of scaling in a digital signal, that you sort of move the numbers all up, but that you actually don't. It's a DC offset. You actually expand them. It's just a data thing. I guess I could have cut that part out of the video, but I didn't want to do all the videos, just do all over the place. Then I did a second video about the DJI Mic 2 compared to some professional mics. And there too, I made a mistake. I thought the DJI Mic 2 didn't have preamp gain settings on the transmitters, but they do. So let's scrap that video. And then today I thought, okay, I'm just gonna do a video focusing on mics. It'll come in from that angle, so I put these four mics together and did it, but I had a hard time getting OBS to record four mics at once. It's really a crazy thing to try. And I couldn't really do it, but I think I got it well enough. But then editing in Kdenlive, I have problems with editing the four tracks in there. I know I probably should have put in DaVinci and dealt with it there. But anyway, so this weekend has just been, a comedy of errors. And it's one thing I envy most YouTube channels about photography and video and stuff like that, because they sort of like deal with well understood issues where they can say, okay, I'm just a story I'm going to tell about this technology. But I'm always investigating the technology. So like a scientist, have a theory, I go try it out. If it's wrong, I can't do anything. So there are many videos I want to post, but the experiments behind them didn't work out. And I guess I could just post about how they didn't work out, why they didn't work out. And I probably should, but anyway, I don't, because I'm just too tired. But then now, today I just so want to get a video out, just because I haven't posted in so long. Like, okay, I'm just gonna ramble in front of the camera for, I don't know if anybody's interested. So one thing that happened a few days ago that sort of got me inspired to do a video is I found this new YouTube channel called Paul Garrity. So Paul Garrity is a documentary filmmaker, essentially, in London, I guess. He does stuff for the BBC. And he did some videos that were amazingly good. Like, he uses the DJI Osmo 3, which I'm recording on now. He does some great stuff with it. So I like his attitude about, like, it's not about getting super heavy, expensive equipment. Like, if you can get a cool effect with a little camera, do it. Anyway, I loved his video. But he said something in the video that, triggered my 32-bit float thing, right? So he recorded a segment at a brewery, and he said, I recorded the segment, but it clipped on my camera, my Sony A7 S3. But fortunately, I had the 32-bit float internal recording from the DJI Mic 2, and I could use that. So he showed an example of the clipped audio from his camera and then the non-clipped audio from the DJI, and said, 32-bit float is great. He even put a picture of the DJI Osmo little transmitter on it. So I wrote in the comments, I said, 32-bit float has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with clipping. I've done a bunch of videos on it. And he responded, well, this isn't a technology channel, this is, just my doing videos and stuff like that. So, buzz off. Again, I'm sure he's a very nice guy. And, again, I loved his channel, but he said 32-bit float, fix clipping, and it does not. And so, it just gets my, so, look at things from my point of view. And I get this response a lot from YouTubers. So obviously the problem is me, and I recognize that. But, if we all want to learn from each other, we have to learn from people who know things that we don't, that explore areas that we don't. And it doesn't mean that I know everything. Obviously I don't, because I spent all weekend making, errors of whatever, like, mistakes. So I don't know everything, but I know some things. And so in his video, but anyway, so like what I'm saying is, like, he should be like, well, okay, it doesn't work. Explain why. What video? Or like, he should go back and forth. But he's just closing his mind off to it. Like, we hate criticism. It's the biggest problem of humanity, right? We can't even take the slightest bit of criticism. And it's not criticism. I'm not criticizing. It's a great channel. I'm just saying, on this thing, it's not like that. So what he didn't quite understand, and the other epiphany for the last video that I tried to do for this channel, is I think like the root problem is we don't think from Microsoft's down through the chain, right? It's the microphone that gives us a certain sort of audio quality and atmosphere. We pick the microphone to get a certain type of sound, right? And then the preamp, digital recording, all the rest of it, that's just in service, to the microphone. And if we really think from the Microsoft on down to how everything works, we can really understand it. But the problem is the manufacturers, right? They want to sell these, preamps and all this cameras and all this stuff. So they're all like bending over each other backwards to sell their equipment based on some new like thing that's better. So like 32-bit float now is all the rage. So all the manufacturers say, oh, 32-bit float doesn't do clipping. Well, it has nothing to do with clipping. Again, I've done so much of videos. But whatever, that's it. So it gets us away. So I would say like if I was starting out, I would say learn the microphone. Learn exactly how both condensers and dynamic microphones, electric microphones work. Learn exactly how the microphone works. Learn why when you get the voltage from the microphone, it's unusable in electronics. How do you get it usable? Well, it's a preamp, right? Well, what are the challenges of a preamp? Why do some preamps not work with other some microphones, but some they work with others, right? I mean, why, like say the Shure SM7B, why it won't work with a lot of preamps, but it does with others. That doesn't mean that the ones that will work with it, all preamps should be able to handle the voltage from a large diaphragm dynamic. But again, we should understand it. Understand that when we take that voltage, when we get that preamp voltage up to a level, we can work with it. When we put it through an analog to digital converter in ADC, what does it mean to go in that data space? What's the difference between 8-bit, 16-bit, 24-bit, and 32-bit float, right? So like the reason many people don't understand 32-bit float is they just think it's like more than 24-bit. The float word doesn't seem to register with them. Like it's something completely different. It actually is still just 24-bit, but you've added 8 bits of scale. And what does it mean to have scale? But again, you need to start with the microphone. And if you start with the microphone, what you'll learn, and if you do some experimentation, is you can generally never resolve past 12 bits. Once you, start quantizing above the noise floor, above where, you're just picking up noise. Once you start like quantizing the lowest part of the voice that you'd want to capture, right? You don't want to capture all the noise below it, right? As soon as you start capturing the voice or whatever it is, and you start capturing up, you go up to 12 bits. And then anything above doesn't add any quality, right? So once you know that, if you know that a microphone you can only get 12 bits of data out of it, then when people tell you 32-bit float, you wonder for a second, well, how? Like if I can get more than 12 bits, what good is even 16 bits or 24 bits or 32 bits? Well, we have 16 bits because that's the way computer architectures have been standardized on. It was 8-bit chunks. That's why we have 16. So anyway, 16 is all you need for any microphone. You don't even need 24. Okay, but back to what Paul did in his video. So Paul said, I recorded these people and I saved it with the 32-bit float internal recording. But what really happened is on his receiver onto the camera. So one of the big problems in audio, and it's especially with consumer audio, is there are different voltages used for different things. So as I said, if you understand microphones output very small voltages. So a dynamic microphone, the voltage is like 0.1 to 0.1 to 1 or 2 millivolts. So to get it to a voltage where the electronics can deal with it, where you could say write it to memory or something, you need to multiply it by a factor of 1,000. And to give you an idea of the scale difference, the voltage you need, let's just even talk about a camera, right? Or audio to digital, your audio interface to your computer. The level of the voltage from a dynamic mic is like the width of the height of a credit card, right? So imagine a credit card. Well, I don't have a credit card, but imagine the width right here, right? So imagine that height right here. That's your microphone signal. you need to multiply it till it's like 5 to 6 feet high, like my height, your height. So think about how much that is, 1,000 times. And you can't just do it with one amplifier circuit. You need multiple you need to like amplify it, amplify it again, right? And again, it all runs in series. And some people say 32-bit flow can do it because you have multiple ADCs. They're talking fantasy land, science fiction. They're breaking the laws of thermodynamics. Anyway, okay, so you have to do it 1,000 times, and even if you're using a condenser, it's 100 times, which is why condensers can almost work with most preamps, because they already have fairly sized good voltage, right? Because they're actually sort of like pre-amplified, because you're getting a current, they call it phantom power, but you're basically energizing the plates within the microphone, and we could go down that rabbit hole. So they're almost sort of like pre-amplified. Now the downside is that they're noisy. It introduces noise to pre-charge them with that phantom voltage. But the upside is they're very sensitive. So that's good. So the reason I mention all this is that the camera doesn't know what you're plugging into it. It doesn't know if you're plugging in a dynamic mic where it needs to multiply it by 1,000, or a condenser mic by 100, or a electroset microphone where you might give it 1 volt or something like that. It doesn't know, or a line current, which is like 1 volt, or a professional line, which might be like I think it's 1.3 volts. So it doesn't know what current you're getting into it. Now, some of the more professional cameras will have settings and say, hey, you're plugging in a mic level input, which again is 0.1 to 1 millivolt or something like that, or in the millivolts, or you plugging in a line voltage, which might be 1 volt coming from a preamp somewhere else. So because the cameras don't really do that, they just assume like we're going to get some very small voltage up to 1 volt, and we're going to have a volume thing, but it's not really a volume. It's not even really a gain. Yeah, it's a gain. I would call it a gain. So it's like you can set the gain on the camera. So when Paul plugged in the receiver, the DJI Mic 2 into his camera, again, doesn't know what it is, he had set the gain too high. So whatever voltage it was, he gained it past the level of what the ADC, the analog to digital converter in the camera, could deal with before writing it to the video or the memory card. So it clipped. It's basically digital clipping. And I wrote, I'll put it in my description, a link to my article will explain the 3 types of clipping from a microphone. 1, the microphone, the diaphragm itself, it just hits against the wall, it just stops moving. Get clipping that way. You get clipping if you over amplify it past what the analog to digital converter can deal with, and you get clipping that way, basically too much voltage into the quantization circuitry. And the third kind is if it's basically, when you have the data, it's a bunch of numbers, you just shift them all over to the right. So they drop off because they can't go past that higher number. And again, that should never happen because, like I said, you only have 12 bits. No problem with that. So anyway, that was the mistake that Paul made, is that he had, again, amplified a signal going in. He said it was the microphone that was too hot. No, it wasn't the microphone that was too hot. It was his receiver that was too hot. And if he had set the gain properly on the camera down, he would have had perfect audio, both locally in the DJI Mic 2 and in the camera. But the more I thought about it, I thought, well, why? Because again, he's a very good filmmaker. Why is he not, why isn't he really interested in this? And when you get Chris in the video, he may now actually be researching and thinking a lot about this. So again, I don't want to think in any way that I'm, saying anything bad about him. But, why wouldn't you be that? I mean, I think from his point of view, and especially when you're dealing with a camera like this, the DJI Osmo 3, this is not, you can use it professionally as he's using it, but it's still a consumer camera. So you don't have all these fancy audio inputs. When you use a camera like this, I agree with him. I just want like an electronic thing I turn on, I put it in somebody's chest or my chest, whatever, and I go, and that's it, right? So he's not really thinking about the microphone. But you can put dynamic microphones into a DJI Osmo. And I've done some videos on some of this other stuff. I think I actually have the box here. So here's a Comica LinkFlex 81. It's basically just a little preamp. So you could plug a Shure SM7B into this, and then you could plug it goes into 3.5 millimeter, and you could plug that into a little small ADC into the Osmo 3, and then you could get that kind of microphone. Because again, you can't not every microphone can go in every piece of equipment without certain types of circuitry in between them, or I should say preamps. So the bottom line is that if he was thinking about the microphone, like if he, like for instance, the SM11, which I like, which is one of the few lavalier dynamic microphones, you can put that into the Osmo 1, but the Osmo Mic 2, but you could with a separate preamp. And understanding why you would need this separate preamp is important. And you'll see a lot of videos people talk, well, this preamp stinks because it only does 40 dB of gain or something like that. No. I mean, it doesn't stink for anything that doesn't need anything more than 40 dB, right? And not necessarily a preamp that can drive a large diaphragm microphone necessarily might be good for a small one. You just have to test all this stuff out. So because he's not really thinking about microphones, he's not thinking about, I guess what I'm saying is that he's always thought about, listen, I just want to get, sounds is secondary. I just want to mic the person as quickly as possible, as long as I understand them, I'm happy. And that's why he falls for this 32-bit flow, because he's like, okay, clipping is always a problem, so anything that saves me from having to deal with it is fine. And I get that. But I want you to understand, I want him to understand, that if you get into microphones, no, you have to understand how everything works. If you want to use any microphone with whatever you're doing. Like I love, well, I don't remember the name of it now, but there's a very famous, very famous interview mic. It's an Electro Voice 2, I think, something 50, 55, whatever. And it's it's dynamic, and you would need like a separate like preamp. So if you want to, like when he did an interview at this some like coffee shop type thing, and again, the internal microphone on DJI is great. The little lavs are great. But if you want to get that sort of deep voice you can get with a larger diaphragm microphone, then you'd want to use it. So he could get something like this, plug it into the DJI transmitter, set the gain on that so that's right. He has to look at the gain there, make sure that gain is right, and then he can use an interval style mic and get a really nice sound. Again, not better sound, but it might be the sound he wants, right? He doesn't want because I don't care what you say, the DJI mic, all these like little lavaliers, they're tinny. Again, tinny isn't bad, we're used to it, it's fine, but it's not the same. Like if you're watching like the Joe Rogan podcast, right? And he's the guy that made the Shure SM7B famous. If you were watching Tim and all of a sudden he switched to a DJI mic, you would notice the difference immediately. You'd be like, this isn't even a show. This is weird. This isn't good. This is bad, because we're used to that very full sound from a large diaphragm dynamic microphone. So, but anyway, yeah, like I said, once you're into these mics, then you understand their chain. You understand why sometimes there are problems with the chain. And then the other thing is, like, for instance, I tried plugging in some dynamics into when I had my GH6, a Panasonic GH6, and the meters showed it was working perfectly. When I listened to it, it was like static. You can't trust the meters on these cameras either. There's just a lot of gotchas in this stuff. In one of the videos I was doing today, I was using the Shure SM11, but I wasn't like curling the cord up to stop from, there's a name for it, where the sound travels up the coil into the microphone. It's very distracting. And anyway, I didn't do that, so I ruined a bunch of takes doing that because I'd forgotten. It's an art. And then where do you place the microphone? Like if you place it closer to the throat, it'll be a little bit higher, the chest a little bit lower. But where's that perfect place for anyone, right? I mean, this is an art. It's as important as the visual stuff. And I find it so fascinating because it's amazing how complicated audio is. But in a good way. Like all the things you can really do with it once you get into it. So I think I've covered all the bases in this video. If you've watched it, I hope you found it interesting. Again, the takeaway I hope that you would get is one, always start with the mic. Understand how all mic works. Then move to the preamp. Understand why it's called a preamp, because it's not an amp, because a mic by itself doesn't do anything. So you have to like get it ready for other amplification. So you don't really call it amplification because it's not really amplification. It's like amplifying in other areas to do things. Understand that in data that you only need 16 bits for microphones. You don't need anything more. Anybody tells you anything else, you need to explain to me how that happens. Because again, I've worked it over my head. I've done research up the gazoo. I cannot see any way. And but again, it doesn't make a difference whether it's not going to do any harm if you record on 3 dB flow. Go ahead. I mean, it's not any harm. It's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. Don't get me wrong. Fine. I'm just saying it doesn't do anything in clipping. Understand how limiters work. And auto gain works. So when they say that 32-bit flow does clipping, they're just, what they do is that they have a limiter, an old school electronic feedback limiter. That's what's going. That's what's stopping the clipping, not the 32-bit flow, but limiter technology, gain technology, auto gain technology, which has been around since radio of the 1930s. It's 100 years old. Okay, it's nothing new. They're just giving it a new name to, I guess, dazzle you or whatever. So yeah, okay, I'm at 21 minutes. I think that's enough. This, again, just want to post a video so there's something up there because I haven't posted in so long. And hopefully next time I'll have something more prepared and better. Thanks for watching.